to read, as I did a couple weeks ago, portions of the first chapter in Genesis, to continue with our creation stories. And I think I have more words on that for this foundation, for sure. But I've just been fascinated by this whole idea. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And continues. God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let there be signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let there be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. And it continues. God said that let the earth bring forth all living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And God saw it was good. And God said, "Let us make humanity in our own image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humanity in God's image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God saw everything that had been made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. On the seventh day God finished the work that had been done, and rested on that seventh day from all the work that had been done. O God of great mystery and wonder, of power and creation, the one of great compassion and mercy, I pray that you'll receive the words that come from my mouth, words based on the meditation of my heart. May these words and what we do here be acceptable in your sight, we pray. Amen. I want to express my profound gratitude to Dr. Benton for last week's sermon. An excellent, deep, profound sermon that helped us to understand the scientific understanding of reality. And that's very important for us, to understand scientifically how this all came into being. From the great people like Larry Evers, Ryan Smith, Matthew Fox. If you understand that, it really opens us up to the extraordinary mystery of life. And if you understand it, fully understand it, you also understand that there is not a contradiction between the scientific understanding and the poetic, the artistic understanding in Genesis. Contrary to what many of the literalists, biblical literalists feel, this was not intended to be scientific. It never was. This is not a scientific understanding of anything, nor is it historical. It is not scientific because you don't have any understanding of the gases or how this creation came into being. Really? It is certainly not historical in terms of these things being created in 7 days. There's no setting in terms of what else might happen. So it's not, the biblical understanding is not scientific. This passage is not historical. It's not a history of how the world came into being. And as I said 2 weeks ago, it appears through the biblical scholars that this was not even the first passage in the Bible. It came hundreds of years later. And according to one of the most important biblical scholars, it was probably written during the exile or post-exilic period, the exile in Babylon. So that the folks who would read this as part of their liturgy when they gathered for their worship services, this was not even a scientific or historical understanding, it was a theological understanding. It was an understanding of how God was moving among the people. And for those in exile, this was an important, very critical liturgy of hope, of new creation, of new possibilities. It said that what had existed was not final, did not have to remain, but could be changed, could be a new creation, could come into being. New creation. This is really very interesting to me because we just had creation, we just had commencement at Star King School for the ministry, and what happens in so many commencement ceremonies is the fact that people see it as the end. And it is the end. You have completed your work when you graduate, but it's only the beginning. Because you have learned, you've been engaged in processes, experiences that prepare you not to live in the past, in terms of what you've studied, but to prepare you for something new, for your own recreation of yourself and the world in which you live. So again, this is not anything about the world came just like, no. The intent is to understand how God is moving in the world to create something new. Dr. Benton, in her meditation, talked about torture. This is an anti-torture liturgy. It is an anti-oppression liturgy. It is anti-finality of human creation and bondage of each other. It's anti all of that. It's positive new possibilities. So again, the folks who were hearing this were hearing something that would help them to make it through exile and to come into a new kind of relationship. What the people who heard this were concerned with was God's intent, not God's need, Ruben says. It is about a transaction, Ruben says, that redefines the world, the known world. And if you read when I was reading the first verse of the scripture, there are really some kind of conflicting ideas there. It says whether the known world either of chaos or of management now becomes a new world surging with the mystery of God's gracious, empowering speech. And the text is heard as news, in a theological idiom, it leaves open all scientific theories about the origin of the world. Let me just show you a little interesting concept. In the beginning, when God created the heaven and the earth. And then the second says, the earth was formless, void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Was it something already in the beginning when God was creating? Or did God create out of a formlessness? Out of chaos? It doesn't matter. It is a theological understanding of possibilities. And those who were in exile are coming out of it. Those who had been oppressed needed something more than just rebelling against the ruling empire. People cannot truly be free if they're just rebelling against oppression. There has to be another dimension of it. Reinhold Niebuhr quotes Bertrand Russell as suggesting in Bertrand Russell's book, Free Man's Worship, that the highest religion, Bertrand Russell says, for a person, he uses the word man, for humanity, that the highest religion is for humanity, for men, for women, to sustain for a moment the world which, let's bring this up, our own ideals have built against the trembling march of unconscious power. I will read that again. Bertrand Russell, that the highest religion is for us, for individuals, for humanity, for humankind, to sustain for a moment the world which our own ideals have built against the trampling march of unconscious power. For us to sustain our ideals, our hopes, our joys, our faith, for us to sustain that in the midst of torture and oppression, misuse and abuse, for us to sustain that for a moment. How critical. Think about it. For us in this country to sustain our ideals against the constant march of oppression, of unconscious power, unseemly power, oppressive power, demonic power. Do you understand the power in this country, globally, and how it is seeking to reduce us to nothing but manageable units, cogs in the wheel, to nothing? And that is why even now, there's so many people who cannot get excited about the election. So many people just turn off, saying, what difference does it make? Even with our representatives, do they really represent us, people are saying? Well, Barbara Lee represents me. She does a good job. But even with that, think of the money even behind Barbara Lee. And money does talk. we come to the point, and frankly, young people sometimes see it better than we do. They say, well, what's the use? For many of us, we say we have to be part of the process because we know that some of us marched and were beaten. We know that people made such sacrifices because they had ideals of what our society could be and must be. And they are sources of inspiration. And so we continue to try to instill hope. We still have some kind of faith in the possibilities of what might come into being. And that's important to sustain. Otherwise, we have to have some sense of hope. You cannot live without it. You have to have faith in some possibility. You just can't live without that. But right on Lieber now, challenges. You got all excited about Big Russell. Reinhold Niebuhr says, but such defiance is only one step from despair. If the ultimate source of all life's vitalities is the evil of unconscious power, the sense of futility must finally overcome the attitude of noble defiance. Now, I'll repeat that. But such defiance that Bertrand also talked about, this sustaining ideal, such against the unconscious power, march of unconscious power. But such defiance is only one step from despair. If the ultimate source of all of life's vitalities is the evil of unconscious power, the sense of futility must finally overcome the attitude of noble defiance. If this is just based upon responding to the evil of unconscious power, ultimately, a sense of futility must finally overcome the attitude of noble defiance. If we are only reacting to the tyrannical march of unconscious power, that we cannot create the kind of future it needs. Ultimately, we will give into despair. And that is what's happening now in our world. A lot of people have given into despair. Because they're trying to hold these ideals up there, and the ideals get nowhere. You know, you try to get a political party out of this person, but the parties don't get anywhere. Run for office. Run for presidency. You think you're going to make it? No. Because you don't have the power behind you. You don't have the... And people with good intentions, good ideas. And so many people see that. And so it takes more than just to sustain this ideal because of the enemy, if you want to put it in those terms, of the oppressive reality. It takes more than that. You may leave oppression, but that does not mean you come into any sense of liberation or freedom. As long as the oppressive reality is still controlling you. You're just reacting to your oppressive reality. You're not free. Yeah. Okay. You're not. And that is why when Moses and the folks came out of Egypt, again, Brueggemann, the great scholar, says that in many ways, these were not a distinct group of people, but these were basically workers. This was a class thing. These were all kinds of workers in Egypt were being exploited, and they left. Leaving was not sufficient. You cannot leave and become a new people if you have the same old ideology that you learned and accepted in oppression. We cannot create the new world that needs to be created as long as we are still accepting the presuppositions of our own enslavement, our own here in this country. To buy into the great American dream, which is a dream that is keeping us in competition with each other, fighting against each other, and making materialism the great goal of life. American dream, 2 cars, all this. It doesn't say we want to. American dream is not to build a nation where we can be kind to each other. A new humanity can come into being, where there's new business. So Moses realized that, okay, all these people are living in oppression, they're talking about the Egyptians, how awful they are. So now we're out here, and guess what? They should have had a Rodney King back in those days. Can't we all get along? Because they couldn't. Grumbling. Why did you bring us out of oppression? We could have stayed in Egypt. At least we had food there. All these kinds of things. So what did Moses do? Moses, we need a covenant. These people are not understanding that we're talking about something new. A brand new kind of people and working together. That's the creation story, a new kind of relatedness. Now Moses was, again, basically, we need to understand this too, an Egyptian. They had lived in Egypt how many years? And so he came forth with some ideas and he tweaked the Egyptian understanding and what we call, what are sometimes called the 42 negative confessions. In other words, he went to Egyptian religion and found some commandments. There were, in this particular, 42 commandments of ancient Egypt. And he borrowed heavily. Borrowed heavily. Let me just give you 8 of those things that he borrowed. Number 1, thou, this comes from Egypt, ancient, hundreds of years, almost 2,000 years before this happened. Thou shalt not kill. We thought that was original with Moses. Thou shalt not kill, nor bid anyone kill. So it's not just thou shalt not kill, but thou or bid anyone kill. That's one confession. They're just, the 8 of them are just so close that you just have to, I just have to share this. 2, thou shalt not commit adultery or rape. Ooh. Thou shalt not steal, nor take that which does not belong to you. Thou shalt not bear false witness, nor support false allegations. Thou shalt not lie, nor speak falsely to the hurt of others. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Thou shalt remember and observe the appointed holy days. They needed new kinds of instructions in order to be a new people. I don't want to go too long. Anyway. In Montgomery, Alabama, just reacting to the oppression was not sufficient. There could not have been a movement, a civil rights movement, if it had just been reacting to oppression. There would have been individual acts against it, but there would not have been a movement. You would not have had a new people coming into being. They needed, just like this speech from God, they needed speeches from Martin Luther King and others. They needed songs. They needed poetry.
They need to be called into newness themselves. They needed to see that it was possible for them to have a very, very different kind of existence, one of dignity and respect. They had to see that, understand it, and believe it. And again, this is why this was so important, that this liturgy is because that's what the folks would say. They would say this over and over and over in their religious service until they believed it. And the possibility of something new coming into being. No, the people in the civil rights movement needed to hear those speeches of Martin Luther King and others. John Lewis, they needed those. They needed to hear, later on, they need to hear James Brown even talking about, I'm black and I'm proud. Because it had not been the reality in the past as they move forward. So that is what this is about. It is not about, this is how the world came into being. But it's about how do we recreate? How do we make new a world? A world that cherishes and does hold our great ideals with reverence, with consecration. That's what this is about. And it's saying that the creation was so absolutely awesome that it should inspire from us, first of all, praise. Praise. Bruno calls praise doxology. It is what Matthew Fox and others call the via positiva, the affirmation of life. It is why we always try to start our worship service with some kind of praise, something to get us out of our own individualism and to understand something beyond ourselves. Part of this is for us to understand the energy that we have, that Matthew Fox talks about in the original blessing, the creative energy, to recognize that there is this creative energy in each and every last one of us. And to help us to try to gather that energy together, to hold it, and to use that energy to transport new ideas, new realities, new people. For in the transportation of those new ideas, new reality, the world will be transformed. And that is the essence. It's the essence of the biblical story. If we can actually make faithfulness to our understanding these ideals of compassion, of newness, of creation. The Bible in and of itself is anti-social, anti-our society, anti-understanding, anti-being a part of and accepting as the ultimate reality of our society. It is always trying to flip things over, always challenge. We don't understand that radical nature of it. Because there are scriptures that can be used in just the opposite way. And some of them were in the opposite way. But there are also these insights that help us to constantly look toward the new. Howard Thurman says, the vicissitudes of life are neither final nor ultimate. And he says that in many places, and especially he talks about it when he's talking about these spirituals, the creation and what we call the Negro spirituals. And they are like this creation story. In the midst of the oppression, they find that there is hope, newness on the horizon, and they can be part of and be about a new people. So they can